The following is a special presentation of Tony Kurre Radio.
Keefer and Kurre, welcome to the week. He is sitting in a hotel room. Were you at the Sonesta Inn?
Yeah, I'm over in Homewood. I've got to be on this side of town for a couple of things this week anyway, and lost all power at the castle on Saturday morning. And Keefer can't sit in the dark and not be able to communicate and watch races and do his thing. So I have relocated to the other side of town and we'll head back home tomorrow night after, because power has been restored, but my power was off. Didn't get put back on till after 11 o'clock. So that Keefer can't do that on a Saturday.
Make sure the maids take care of you. Normally when we sit there and talk, and I'll ask you if you get an idea. If you don't, I'll usually throw something out. And if I can't find something, sometimes I'll just go back and look at what happened on this date in history.
Oh, that's
and,
cool.
And a lot of times, from a default standpoint, and it's funny because every time I do this, there's something always amazing that happened on this date in history. And I don't know if it's because
May 19th, right?
May 19th. Maybe if I went back and looked at another day like January 7th, because I know that not every day in history something magical happened, but I do want to throw a couple things. So some of these are small, some of these are kind of big, and I'll end it with a big one.
You know how much I love my history, so I'm always down for this.
So I'm going to see AC/DC at Nissan Stadium tomorrow night with my boy. Tickets are $800-900, and I'm like, I can't do it. It's a now. Have you seen a stadium show before?
Oh yeah, sure.
Okay, so I've seen U2, Pink Floyd, Rolling Stones. It doesn't really matter where you're sitting at a stadium concert, unless you're sitting like on the front row. And even if you're sitting in the front row, you're pretty far off. So I'm like, there's no reason now. If they were playing a smaller venue like an amphitheater, something like that, I'd go knock a bank off just to make enough money to show my son.
It does make a big difference it
really does.
In a place like that.
But when you're talking 80,000 people, you know, everyone's telling me just pay the price, get in and go down. So my son, who's good the StubHub thing, he said, Dad, I got the tickets. He's got us in the pit. The pit is that area right in front of the stage.
Yeah.
And the only bad thing is there's no seats. But he's like $250 a pop, and I was like, "Oh hell yeah!" So I said, "But we're gonna show you a good time. Screw that hip hop crap. I'm gonna show you some Thunderstruck coming up tomorrow night. I'm looking forward to that. So that's gonna be happening." Phil Rudd, the drummer of AC/DC, turned 71 today. Pete Townsend, you want to take a stab at how old Pete turns today?
Oh, Pete's got to be late 79.
He turns a big old 80 today.
80. Well, I missed it by 1 year.
Something we mentioned last week right here on the Keefer and Kurre show back in 1960, this DJ Alan Freed, you know that guy?
Yeah.
He's the one who came up with rock and roll as the verbiage as it was. He was indicted along with 7 others for accepting $30,650 in payola from 6 record companies. Remember we just talked about that last week about how record companies to pay these guys?
$30,000?
$30,000 back in 1960. That was some jack, brother. That is some serious
I know.
cash.
In today's that'd be insulting if they only tried to give you $30,000.
Really, and that is comparable to about $460,000 in today's money.
Wow.
So think of, that's $500,000 someone's paying you to play a record. We like to call that plugola, not payola, plugola. 2 years later,
you were getting like Burger King coupons and stuff, right?
I was getting free pizzas from Domino's for playing
free pizzas.
for playing Sweet Home Alabama. 2 years later, he was convicted and received a suspended sentence and a $300 fine. So it seems like he turned out pretty well in that particular thing. Do you remember the song Louie Louie?
Of course, Louie Louie.
That was a song written and produced and sung by the Kingsmen back in 1965. Can you remember when the FBI got involved with the Kingsmen on this particular song?
I remember they did, but I don't remember the details.
They would go and break into Wanda Records, which of course produced the record, to investigate the lyrics to Louie Louie to see if there was some type of communism, whether it was an anti-war or something or other. They were trying to figure out what the hell the song was saying, because there was a lot of radio stations that would not play it because they thought it was saying things that we did not. Yeah, exactly. So they'd eventually release a statement that said it was impossible to exactly decipher the lyrics from the unintelligible renditions performed by the Kingsmen. So they just let it go. And to this day, the Kingsmen never said what the song was about.
That was like modern day China now, where they scrutinize their own citizens and look for any statements or any phrases that makes them anti-government. I cannot believe you had, an internal United States that was investigating that kind of thing. That's absurd.
Could you imagine? Seriously, could you imagine the FBI investigating? Well, right now, like we're investigating P. Diddy, but for a different reason. But could you imagine like the FBI investigating lyrics of a Taylor Swift song? I mean,
no.
Yeah. On this date, 1975, Leonard Skinner released Saturday Night Special. A lot of radio stations wouldn't play it because it talks about the evils of misused handguns. It would go to number 27 for 1 week and drop out of the top 100. A lot of people didn't even want to list that song. Great song from Leonard Skinner, but just because it talked about guns, we've changed a lot, my friend, since 1975. Also, 1976, the Rolling Stones' Keith Richards crashes Bentley into a highway divider. And Newton Pagnell, a town 50 miles north of London, police would find various substances, including cocaine and, of course, possession of marijuana in his car in 1976.
Tony, what year was that?
1976.
Okay, if the over-under that when that happened was like 1977, I'd have bet under for sure. And here he is still alive.
I know, right?
How in the hell has he done it? This guy should have been goner before the 80s.
They're still on the road. They're still in
unbelievable.
Concert.
What a beast.
1977. One of my favorite lines from this movie. You sounded a lot taller on the radio. Do you remember that line?
I do.
Universal Pictures releases the film Smokey and the Bandit in theaters across America, starring Burt Reynolds, Sally Field, Jerry Reed, and Jackie Gleason. That was one of my favorite. You sound a lot
cool
taller
thing about those movies, as goofy as they were, you could just tell all the people in it were just having the time of their life making that, because it was just a gigantic party. It was more like an inside look at all these stars, because there's all kinds of cameos in those movies. They're still fun to watch, even though the movies are stupid.
A movie that you never see, and it's one of the. I'm going to go watch it tonight. Cannonball Run is one of the greatest movies of all time.
It's great.
And Dom DeLuise would you remember how many times Burt Reynolds used to smack the shit out of him in that movie, and he was actually smacking the dirt out of him. He said it got to the point where every time Burt would get close to him, he would just smack him across the face. Fantastic movie. The closest thing to a Beatles reunion happened on this date in 1979. Paul McCartney, George Harrison, and Ringo Starr played together at Eric Clapton's wedding reception.
How about that?
Man, talk about some big dogs coming to your wedding.
Special.
That'd be something crazy. And on this date, back in 1962, this gentleman was having a very special birthday, his 45th birthday at the Madison Square Garden. His name was John F. Kennedy. And
happy birthday, Mr. President.
On this date in 1962, Marilyn Monroe, some 76 days before she would have her life taken from her at the age of 36, she sang Happy Birthday, Mr. President. She also sang a rendition of Thanks for the Memories shortly after that. A lot of people
I did not know that.
Yes, she did that. But she sang Happy Birthday, Mr. President. Of course, after she did that, there were all kinds of crazy rumors going around, this, that, and the other. And I'm trying to think to myself if we could put it in context. And again, and then of course he'd be assassinated the following November in 1963. Can we even make it? Can we even make an acknowledgement? Can we even make a comparison of who it would be? Like if Beyonce sang Happy Birthday to Barack Obama, would that be close? I mean, what would it take for someone that was she was a sex squeal, dude. She posed naked, for gosh sakes. They had pictures of her naked. She was the sexiest thing on the face of the earth. I can't say that about Beyonce. I guess you could say maybe J-Lo, maybe even her age. I'm trying to think of some Shakira. I'm trying to think of some really sexy, hot singers.
Yeah, who's the biggest bombshell just from an appearance standpoint? I mean, we really don't put actresses on that pedestal anymore based on just and maybe that's a good evolvement, that it's not just all on looks and everything now. Probably the most respected actress that we have is Meryl Streep, and I never thought she was much to look at. But the bottom line is, Marilyn Monroe reached her pinnacle of stardom because she was such a bombshell and because she was willing. Even if you watch that clip of her singing to the president,
Oh my gosh.
I mean, she's wearing the tightest dress with the most cleavage that, I mean, it was almost like they were at a strip club.
No.
And they're at Madison Square Garden, a formal deal. Everybody else wearing tuxedos.
Mhm.
But yeah, she was just different. And I think we can drop the speculation. John Kennedy, it's been well documented, was very active in the art of physical contact with admirers. It was always a big part of his schedule. Supposedly, Marilyn Monroe, when it became politically expedient for Kennedy to kind of distance himself from her and his other Hollywood chums like Frank Sinatra, Bobby Kennedy was responsible for a lot of that, of saying politically, this is going to kill you. Nope. And of course, he got killed anyway. But the bottom line is they had pretty much cut off Marilyn after that Madison Square Garden thing. And supposedly she had the private numbers and called the White House switchboard like 25 times a day demanding to speak to Kennedy. And it really got to be a real hassle. And it is awfully suspicious that she had this mysterious death.
Yeah.
When
it really was that
timing wise, and a lot of people. It's even been speculated, Tony, when Robert Kennedy went out there to deal with her, he fell into her charms. And supposedly Robert Kennedy had a brief torrid affair with her, too, before her exit. So,
yeah, 76 days. I mean, there were about 15,000 people at that Madison Square Garden gig. And of course, they were raising money for the Democratic Party, and they just went ahead and made his birthday as part of the celebration. And I knew you'd have some information about that I could not find, and you delivered again. So I know you'd know something about that. But yeah, the fact that it was 76 days. Now listen, I mean, she was a mess. I mean, she had gotten into drugs and alcohol and everything else, and of course, she had the really bizarre relationships with the Joe DiMaggio.
And Arthur Miller, the playwright.
Arthur Miller, yeah. I mean, it was just if anything screamed that she had no father figure in her life, it was Marilyn
That's
Monroe,
what she was looking for with those guys, is somebody to kind of take charge.
Because Joe wasn't a man to look at. I mean, he wasn't. He was a hell of a baseball player, but
he
was
not really overflowing with personality either.
No, not even in a little bit.
And a lot of people will tell you that DiMaggio was just kind of an ass. I mean, he was kind of really arrogant and stuck up. He resented Mickey Mantle, the brilliantly talented young guy that came up to seemingly take his place. A lot of people blame Mantle's most serious knee injury on DiMaggio for calling him off of a fly ball right between them, right before Mantle was going to catch it, and made Mantle pull up abruptly, and he ruptured his knee. I mean, of course, DiMaggio didn't know that was going to happen, but a lot of people say that play was caused by DiMaggio just trying to overshadow, I'm the center fielder, I'm going to catch that. And it led to a horrible knee injury that plagued Mantle the rest of his career. As great as he was, a guy that was convinced he was only going to live into his 30s, like a lot of his other male relatives, Mantle could have been the greatest player in the history of the game, and he already ranks as in the top 4 or 5, but he was hurt or drunk the rest of his career.
Funny little story too about that particular performance, because when she was actually saying, and you remember, we didn't have social media. We found out things days, sometimes even weeks afterwards. But do you remember First Lady Jacqueline Kennedy, who of course was beloved and many people just absolutely loved everything she did for her. She rarely attended any type of Democratic Party functions. She wasn't into it. And that particular day, while Marilyn Monroe was sitting on his knee singing happy birthday, she was actually with her children at the Loudoun Hunt Horse Stadium show, which was right down the street. And so while there was people taking pictures of her sitting on his lap at his 45th birthday, she's sitting there taking the entire family out to a horse show, in the park. And people were like, poor woman, look what she's doing. And look what he gets to do with all of his cronies and all of his good. But I mean, it was just, it was one of those things that, it had to happen. By the way, for the thanks for the memory, she sang, "Thanks, Mr. President, for all the things you've done, the battles that you've won, the way you deal with U.S. Steel and our problems by the ton. We thank you so much."
Oh, wow. Cool.
Yeah. So I
have never heard that rendition. I'll have to track that down.
And for people that listen to Jocks 94.5, I used to do My Marilyn Monroe, I used to sing happy birthday to every special guest that came on our show. I used to sing in a lusty voice. My dad used to call in Johnny Bench. Sang happy John Hurley from Seinfeld. I sang happy birthday to him. Mike Schmidt, you name it. I probably sang it about 100 different times to different celebrities who came on our radio station. So, and everyone thought that was, and I don't even remember why I started singing it. I started singing it that way. I just knew it was going to be ridiculous and stupid, and people seemed to like it. So it was kind of fun. But yeah, I'm just trying to think, it's interesting because it, life is so, it's unfortunate, with social media. It's so funny, Kip, man. I'm sitting there the other day. I found a newspaper article on the day that Pete Rose broke Ty Cobb's record. He got 41, 92. And I had like several copies of it, and I gave one to my son. And he opened the front page of the sports section, and on the inside where the sports section, it said Cubs 3, Royals 2, Reds 4, Dodgers 5.
Yeah.
And then the last 4 games, it said night next to it.
Yeah.
And my
because
son
they
said,
had a deadline.
and my son said, "What's that?" I said, "It was a night game." And he goes, Where's the scores?" I said, "They didn't know the scores." He goes,
Yeah.
"Well, how'd you find the scores?" I said, "You either were at the game or you asked somebody the next day."
Yep.
And he goes, "What do you mean?" I said, "You couldn't get the score, Santo." I said, "And now you get the score the next day." He said, "You're telling me that you wouldn't know the score of a game for like 24 hours?" I said, "No." I said, "We didn't know what the score was because if it didn't get to the newspaper printer by 11 o'clock, sometimes it'd be like in the 7th. I remember them in the 7th inning last night, the Reds led 7-6, details tomorrow in tomorrow's paper."
Yeah.
He's like,
Mhm.
"You used to read that crap?" I said, "That's all we had."
Yeah,
That's all we had. I said it would be night games. And I'm thinking to myself, man, how crazy was that?
Yep.
And
Well,
even
remember the old George Carlin bit? He goes, and a partial score from the West Coast, Dodgers 4.
yeah. I mean, it was crazy because you never got any of the left coast games. I mean, you never got any of those games at all. But the movement of things was so methodical and so much slower. And I think because it moves so much faster now, I think that's why it seems like time's flying by so much faster. A lot of people think it's just because we're getting older. As you get older, time flies by. It's just it's a blur. It's a blur
Yep,
every single
it
week
sure
from right
is.
now. And I think a lot of it has to do with the fact that we get stuff really. That's the great thing too, though, about say something like a Marilyn Monroe or and maybe not a P. Diddy situation because this thing seems like it's going to go on for weeks. But the news cycle does switch over so quickly that if you get in trouble and you don't do anything beyond that point, we're going to forget about it.
Yeah.
We're
48
gonna-
hours later, they move on to the
Someone
next
else
thing.
will steal your thunder in a bad kind of way. Someone else will do something stupid, jerk off, and you're gonna next thing you know, you're not going to be in the newspaper anymore. But yeah, in order to get, I mean, it was really difficult back in those times to get in a paper, and if you were, it was 3 or 4 days after the fact. So a lot of people probably didn't see this Marilyn Monroe thing probably 3 or 4 days until after it happened back.
Oh,
in the
for
60s.
sure.
But kind of crazy. All right, wanted to ask you real quick, the NBA playoffs. I know you're shaking your head. First round comes through, and I think we all agree that along with the NHL, it was some of the greatest basketball games we had seen, some last second things. Second round, I think really surprising. Of course, the Knicks get it done. Really surprising that OKC had to go 7 with Denver. I thought that was a fantastic. And by the way, OKC looked absolutely fantastic.
Yeah,
yesterday
that's how they
that-
should have looked the whole
Oh,
series.
man, after that
I don't
first
know
quarter, yeah.
why. They're a young team and they're pretty 3-point reliant. And in this day and age, I mean, you're going to have days where you're just not knocking those down, and you better have a plan B. And they're not real good in the half court games. So although they do have a couple guys that can really take it to the cup, but I think they're learning. It was probably a good thing for them adversity wise to go through a tough series because it's going to make them a better team going forward here, I think.
At one point, Denver had a 13-point lead in that basketball game.
Yeah, early on they did.
And
then it was gone in the blink of an eye.
They switched that around. There was a 54-point turnaround. 54-point turnaround. At one point, OKC led by 41 in that game. And I heard a stat yesterday, which is just kind of blows my mind. But out of all the wins that OKC had this year, 54 of their wins, they only play 82 games. 54 of their wins were by double digit, which
Yep.
was an NBA record. And and I'm watching the game yesterday, and I'm seeing Denver down by 13, and I'm thinking to myself, okay, they're not going to blow OKC out at their house. So I knew it was going to be a game, and I know that even though a team's up by 20 in the middle of the fourth, it doesn't mean they can't come back
No, we
and win
look
the
at the Knicks
basketball
and
game.
Celtics series.
But I did, and I don't know if there's any proof behind this or not, but it seems like there was to have the best of the best, and now we're getting down to the Western Eastern Conference Finals. We got 4 teams left. I can almost tell you right now that out of those 4 teams, we're going to have a couple of 30-point losses. And I don't know what that.
Oh,
I don't,
for sure.
Well, what does that say about? What does that mean? I don't know what that means. What does that mean when you have the 4 best teams in the NBA? You have all-stars all over the place, yet you have a team that can lose by 30. You don't see that in high school. You don't see that in college. You don't see that anywhere. Once in a while in college, you'll see a 30-point blowout, but you'll never see North Carolina beat Duke by 30. It don't happen. It does not happen. So what makes the NBA different? That is it just like going over 14 during a stretch and the other team going 13 for 14? Next thing you know, you get a 30-point game. I mean, why are there so many blowouts?
Well, I just think there's different reasons for it. But I think it's how the game is played in a lot of ways. As I mentioned, the 3-point shot has become such the dominant factor in basketball. You got guys like Alabama's coach Nate Oates he preaches if you can't take it right to the basket and just drop it in, mid-range jump shots have been eliminated. Yep. Those are high percentage shots from around the top of the from the corner of the foul line and the key and from the corner. Now you got to be out beyond 3-point range because there's so much more value in those shots. But the degree of difficulty on those shots is a lot higher. So if you have a night and if you look at a lot of these blowout games, look at the 3-point percentages of the team that's on the losing end, it's usually pretty abysmal. And I think teams have become so reliant on that the game has changed. It used to be the NBA has gone through the most amazing transition imaginable because it's as recently as 7 or 8 years ago, the game was still, bringing it up slowly, dumping it down to the big guy in the post. He would bat around with his rear end and try and create position and either try to draw a foul or shoot a 3-footer. That was the game. The entire 24-second clock was the big man having the ball in his hands. Yep. Every once in a while, he'd kick it back out and somebody would jack up a shot, but that the game is so completely different now. And I also think this generation of athletes, to me, I don't know. I'm not going to say teams quit, but when things are going really bad, you can see teams kind of effort-wise just sort of mailing it in at the end of the game, and that expands those blowouts even more. But that's kind of a crazy thing to do because you look at, as you mentioned, the Knicks in the first 2 games of the Boston series were down 20 points in the third quarter and came storming back to win. So you got to keep playing. You've got to instill that in your players that no matter how bad things are going in the NBA, you're just a blink of an eye away from a big run and get back in the game. But I think maybe it's a little bit of combination of both that the teams kind of throw in the towel and say, okay, we'll get them next game. Because there's just no other explanation. As ridiculous as 30-point blowouts are or more, I know Oklahoma City's won a couple games in the 40s in these playoffs, but then they come back the next game and lose. I mean, I know. If you're playing in high school or college and the team beats you by 40, you don't beat them the next time you play them. I'm sorry. It does not happen anywhere except for the NBA.
No, and I don't know if I guess I like this style in NBA more than I do. I guess I do. I mean, I like the fact that I can't turn the game off. I mean, that was the whole idea, right? You don't want to have to turn the game off. If you're down by 30 in the third points, you may walk away from the TV screen for about an hour and then come back and go, holy smokes, what just happened here? And I did that because I had the over 110 in team points for that game, and they scored 21 points in the first quarter. I was like, sometimes I'm the I'm the schlep rock, man. I just come in and touch something and it just gets cold. And next thing you know, I come back and they're in the 90s in the third quarter. I'm like, how in the world? I mean, this went absolutely crazy. And that's the scary thing about an OKC. They can score in a quick hurry. Hey, before I let you go too, Preakness this past weekend, I was really surprised. You came with River Timms
I
And I
thought
know,
he would go to the front, and he got beaten to the front by a horse that was if you remember my picks, the 9 horse who
yep.
was 50-1 was my 4th pick.
Mhm.
He was the only really long shot that I gave any chance to because he had enough early speed to get to the lead. I thought whoever got to the lead had a good chance to win that race, and I was 90% convinced it was going to be River Tim's in front. Now, when we texted on Saturday, I told you journalism still is the likely winner because
Yep.
he's the best horse in the race. But that track was really more set up for a speed horse. And Gosker had a 5-length lead in the stretch. And talking about
Unbelievable.
comebacks,
That was,
journalism, that
oh
just
man.
goes to show you. You asked me a question on the starting lineup previously. What makes a great racehorse? Is it appearance? Is it bloodlines? I said it's something we can't see. It's heart. And that's a horse that saw a horse ahead of him, and he was just hell bent. And it's amazing how these racehorses do this often enough where, I'm not going to say they know where the finish line is, but they know where they have to get to with maximum effort because you see them start to kind of pull up right, when they get there. So I think maybe they're a little smarter than we give them credit for.
It's amazing too because, and I don't know this horse. I don't have a clue. But if you tell me this horse is smart, I believe this horse is smart. A lot of people said journalism is one of the smartest horses they've ever seen. Unlike a Barbaro where they just have sheer power, they have no clue where they're at. They just take the whip and they just run like hell. Journalism is one of those horses, and even the jockey said as much so that he said it was the best ride I ever had. It was just I knew that when I got on the inside rail, I was going to be in some trouble if I got shot out. But he also knew that if he went outside, he had a chance of losing that race. But he's like, holy smoke, coming down the stretch, he's like, I think I'm going to win this race, and he did.
There's just certain animals that just have that extra sense. The greatest greyhound I ever saw in my career in greyhound racing was a greyhound named Perceive. And Perceive at one point had like an 18 race winning streak, and he was just awesome. But at the end of the race, where when the lure tucks in and all the dogs gather around wagging their tails and barking at it at the finish, he didn't go for that nonsense. He would stop with everybody else and he would peel off and start walking toward the sidewalk where he knew that the guys were coming to attach the leash. He was bypassing all that. So he was already, I was convinced that if people just left him alone, he would have walked home to the kennel and put himself away and put himself in his crate. There's just certain animals that just have an extra something. And maybe journalism, Sovereignty runs such a big race to run him down. Maybe that's going to put an asterisk on a horse that maybe will go to New York in 3 weeks and really show us in Secretariat type form how great he can be. This might be the best horse of several generations, and Sovereignty just had his number that day because it was a sloppy track and he was from California, never been on anything like that. But I tell you, that stretch move by journalism was something that should be talked about for a long
They
time.
were rubbing elbows, man. It was awesome to watch. Were you surprised that Clever again? I know that it came in last, but I
Yeah.
was really surprised. I mean, about everybody and their mother picked that horse to win that race. I mean, out of the 12
Yeah.
people, 10 of them picked Clever again. I hadn't heard a lot about the horse because
Well,
you
again,
hadn't
he
said
was
anything
my
about it.
third pick for that same reason because I knew he had a good chance to get to the front. I ended up landing on River Thames because I thought he was the classiest of those 3 front runners. But I'm not surprised. There's certain horses that have to have the lead. They're kind of pack animals. They have that kind of, if you watch them out in the fields, there's always kind of one alpha one that wants to show speed, but when they tire and somebody overtakes them, they kind of drop back and don't care anymore. And
Yep.
I think that's unfortunately the stamp that's going to be on Clever again because he ended up dead last in the race. Everybody
Yeah,
passed him.
well, and everyone said the jockey pulled up too, and that's fine. I know that happens, but not in a race of
Yeah,
that
you just kind of
magnitude.
wrap up on them and don't really encourage them once they're dropping back so badly.
So we got 2 seconds. Give me an early pick for Belmont.
Uh, I'll tell you, journalism against Sovereignty is going to be a hell of a battle because the more distance would seemingly favor Sovereignty. But what happens is the Belmont is a weird race from the standpoint that everybody kind of figures the big closer is going to have the advantage, and a lot of times that's not the case because journalism showed a little bit of early speed in the front stretch in the Preakness. In the Belmonts, just like when Secretariat, moving like a tremendous machine, won by 31 lengths in the Belmont to wrap up the Triple Crown. The greatest, it was ranked by ESPN the second greatest sports performance of all time, and it was a four-legged guy, not a two-legged. For him to set a track record that has not been approached, that's another thing. Secretariat has all three track records in the Derby, the Preakness, and the Belmont. That was in 1972, Tony. Look at how people are bigger, animals are bigger, care, everything. What a freak that guy was.
Drugs are better.
Yeah, there you go.
I mean,
but that was 50 years ago, and this horse still has all those records. Yep. It's just unbelievable. But in the Belmont, in both the Preakness and the Derby, he had to come from way behind. In the Belmont, he got around second in that race, and that's when he poured it on. I'm kind of journalism I knew he was a great horse, but now I'm stamping him as truly great. I think he's my early lean in the Belmont to hold off Sovereignty.
Coming up this Saturday, 10:30, 11 o'clock at ABC 3340. It is the starting lineup. We're going to have our good friend Seth Cosby there. Comic-Con is coming to town. A bunch of flipping freaks, man, that are into comics and stuff like that is coming to town, the BJCC. He's going to have all kinds of great toys, some Sasquatch toys and comics. He'll join us on the show coming up on Thursday. He'll probably bring some stuff that you and I are probably into, maybe some evil.
Is our man Seth going to be set up with a booth over there?
I'm sure he will. I'm sure he'll be all over that bad boy. So he wanted to make sure he was going to come on our show because we know everyone watches our show every Saturday morning from 10:30, 11 o'clock. And you, in case you're catching this a little bit later on, are going to be on terrestrial radio tomorrow from 2.
Well, in fact, this is a big week for me. I'm scheduled later today. This is Monday. We're putting our show together. I'm scheduled to be on the Paul Feinbaum show this afternoon, out from the Hoover Met, me and the legend. And then tomorrow I'll be hosting the 10 to 2 show, the Andrew McLean show on Talk 99.5. So if you want to tune in and get more need to know from the Kip Keefer terrestrial radio perspective for 4 hours. Radio shows shouldn't be 4 hours, Tony. That's too much time.
they made that length for you.
Yeah, to give me 4 hours is really stretching things. But anyway, I'm excited to have a couple of other media opportunities, and we got a lot of good things going on. Our starting lineup, and of course our football shows in the summer and fall are right around the corner. So we're going to be, we're going to be with the Saturday shows and a Sunday morning show. I'm getting T-shirts printed up that say Weekend Domination because that's what we're going to be doing.
Nice. Good stuff, brother. We'll talk to you this week.
All right, Tony. Thanks. Enjoyed it.
This has been a special presentation of Tony Curry Radio.